Hey there friends, thanks for joining me again. And today I have an important video on house affordability, or how much house you can afford. Honestly, I think this is one of the #1 places where a lot of people have gone wrong. And unfortunately, if you get this wrong, it can end up ultimately ending in foreclosure, and I really don't want any of that to happen to you guys. And so that's why I want to go through the house affordability thing with you so that you can kind of figure out how much a house will cost, not only up front, but also, your continuing costs to make sure that you can afford not only to get in your house, but you can actually afford to live there. So, let's get started. Okay, so of course, like I just mentioned, there are two types of, things to consider. Let's just go in chronological order and let's just work with the upfront cost, the stuff that will actually take place from the time you start looking for your house through closing. And so the first thing you're going to have to consider, of course, is your mortgage. And that makes a big difference on how much you're going to end up paying when it comes to your closing. So let's talk about the different types of mortgages really quickly. And honestly, this is also tied to the continuing, but it really relates to the whole big picture, so we'll just start here. So there are two types of main mortgages. There's a fixed rate and an adjustable rate mortgage, or an ARM. Fixed rate, the rate is introduced at the time when the loan is enacted, and then it just continues all the way through, the loan term until either you sell the house, you refinance, or you pay it off. So the loan or the interest rate stays the same for the entire time. And then an adjustable rate mortgage, these are a little bit more complicated. There are 3, 5, and 7 years, and so you'll lock in an interest rate, and then later on it could adjust down the road. Different, reasons why people might want the adjustable rate over the fixed rate is if you already know you're going to sell anyway, if you want to build up equity faster. But honestly, adjustable rate mortgages are being chosen less and less right now because interest rates are already so low. So the adjustable rate mortgages don't actually offer that much lower of an interest rate than the fixed rates. Honestly, if you can qualify for a fixed rate, I would highly recommend just locking in a nice low interest rate and sticking with it because their interest rates are so low now. I highly doubt that they could go much lower, and the only direction that they could go is up, so locking in a good interest rate right now would be a better idea. Okay, and then the other types would be conventional or FHA. Those are the two main types of, or who actually would give you the money. The conventional loans, there's two main types there. There's regular, which start at about 5% down, and these ones have the least requirements out of all of the mortgages out there, which is great. So again, if you can qualify for a conventional mortgage, I would highly recommend going for that. And then the other type of conventional mortgage is what they call a jumbo loan. These, you have to have a higher income, you have to have a really high credit score, you have to have a large amount of money to put down payment, and then they also have higher interest rates because you borrow so much. A jumbo loan starts at a loan amount of $417,000. So with all of the money that you would have to put down on the house, these are for buyers that are looking more in, say, the $500,000 purchase price range and up, and then still need to finance that house. So that's what the jumbo loan is about. Honestly, I would highly recommend steering clear of these just because of the, more things that are required. And also the fact that purchase price is that high, it can be a little scary. Back when we had the housing crisis, the highest end houses were the ones that fell the most, whereas the lower end houses really didn't have that far to fall, so they didn't really fall that far. But you can lose a lot of equity really fast on a really expensive house. Yeah, but just so you know, that's available. And then the other type of main mortgage would be the FHA. FHA loans are actually done through HUD. And so these are not just for first-time home buyers. There's a misconception that's mainly, that FHA loans are mainly for first-time home buyers. You don't have to be, although FHA loans have, different kind of qualifications. So if you can get a conventional loan, that's probably a better choice. But FHA loans can be a good choice for people because the down payments start as low as 3.5%, so a bit lower than the conventional loan. But there are some issues with them because they do require mortgage insurance for the entire life of the loan. Mortgage insurance insures the people who loan you the money in case you default. You basically get nothing out of this, and yet you're required to pay it. And in a lot of cases it can be kind of pricey. So this adds to your payment. Instead of having, say, a $1,200 mortgage payment, you may end up having a $1,300 mortgage payment. That's definitely something to consider if you are willing to have a little bit less to put down as a down payment, but you're willing to have a higher payment. This may be an alright option for you. A couple of other loans that FHA offers is a VA. These are for veterans. They actually, the main pull to these is that they don't require any money down. You can buy a house with as little as zero, just the closing costs and a few other things. And then another type of FHA loan is a USDA loan. These are for rural people who have low or modest incomes. You have to make less than 115% of the median income in your area. So you have to make at least around what the median is or below, and be buying a property in a rural location in order to qualify for this, and these have some different qualifications as well. So there you go. There's just a really quick rundown of the different types of mortgages and the different amounts that you have to put down. Honestly, I think the best case scenario, which is really difficult for some people to do, is actually to put 20% down so that you can eliminate that private mortgage insurance altogether and qualify for a conventional loan. And if you watched some of my other videos about how to improve your credit and buy down your debts and that sort of thing, you're going to have the credit that you need in order to qualify for those, etc. And so if you can get one of those, personally I think that those are a better choice. But buying a house with any mortgage is probably better than not buying a house at all in certain instances. Buying a house, of course, isn't right for everyone, but if you want to buy a house and you have to choose a different type of mortgage in order to do so, again, I don't believe in blanket advice here, so I don't think any of these are bad choices. Okay, let's move on. So let's talk about some of the stuff that we would have to come up with at closing, because we're continuing with this whole thing. Honestly, this is one of the most underestimated things that are out there. People will say, okay, well, I want to put 20% down on my house. I want to spend about $250,000 in it. I have $50,000 saved. I'm good to buy a house, right? No, there are a whole lot of other costs to consider. So let's move on to that. So when you actually close on your house, that's when you pay your whole down payment, whatever it is. You have to pay closing costs depending on where you shop for your mortgage, which is the next video in this series, actually. So if you're watching this video right as I put it out, there probably won't be an iCard over there, but if you're watching it later on, there will be, about how to shop for a mortgage, which I highly recommend that you do because you can save thousands of dollars by doing so. But yeah, there are a lot of different closing costs that can be associated. There are tons of different types of fees. Some people have administration fees. They have, underwriting fees. They have origination fees. They have just a ridiculous amount of different types of fees. A lot of times you have to pay taxes. You have to pay the taxes on your house up front for that year. You have to pay for an entire year's worth of homeowner's insurance at the time when you close. Oftentimes you have to pay for an appraisal to make sure the house is worth what you're paying for it, at least, if not more. You have to pay for an inspection, which I highly recommend that you don't skimp on, because otherwise you can get yourself into a house that's a big problem. And you don't want to end up buying something that has all these different hidden problems that you can't see and then have a whole lot of costs down the road because of that. Oftentimes you have to pay interest from the time that you buy the property until the first of the next month before the interest starts getting calculated toward your monthly payment after that. So if you were to buy the house on the 15th, you have to pay the interest from the 15th through the 30th or 31st, whatever that month has, how many days it has, up front at closing, and then the next interest is paid in the rears so that when you pay your mortgage the next following month on the 1st, you're paying all of that interest in your first mortgage payment. Hopefully that didn't confuse you, but yes, there is some interest toward the loan that you're getting right now, due at closing, depending on what time of the month that you get it. Yes, it is lower at the end of the month if you close on it, and it is higher if you close on it at the beginning of the month because there are more days of interest that you're actually paying. Oftentimes they'll charge you to get a credit score, and so you'll have to pay for that. You'll have to pay for title insurance, to check to see if your house is in a flood zone. Some places charge you fees if if you have to start a escrow account. Sometimes you have to get a survey. There could be even more fees on here that I don't even have listed. But then again, not every loan is going to require this. Maybe you buy a house that doesn't require, an escrow account, or maybe they don't require a survey, etc. So not all of these fees are going to be charged every time, but there are other fees that may be charged. So it's definitely important to ask, again, when you shop around for that mortgage, but that's the next video. Otherwise, this one will end up being an hour long. Okay, let's move on. So then, of course, after you close on your house and you're already in it, there's the continuing costs, and those are really important to consider too, because of course everybody wants to not only have their house, but they want to be able to comfortably live in it too. So There's the mortgage. You obviously have to consider how much your mortgage payment is going to be. That can be a little overwhelming to try to figure out, because if you go online and you look things up, it's entirely different than if you go to a bank or try to figure it out, and a lot of people have gotten themselves into trouble. Investopedia says that you can borrow or should borrow somewhere around in the range of 2 to 2.5 times your annual gross income. So going back to the same situations we've been talking about in this entire series, let's just say someone has that median income of about $70,000. Okay, so that means with that you should borrow, or your house's purchase price should be around $140,000 to $175,000. So really not a whole lot. When we looked at the median house price, it was substantially higher than that purchase price, and so that seems a little bit on the low side. Some of these online pre-approval, get pre-approved now, just type in your information, we'll tell you how much we can, loan to you, etc. Of course, it asks some different questions. What is your credit score? What are your credit card limits? How much money are you going to put down? What other kinds of debts do you have? But best case scenario, high credit score, low credit card limits, 20% down, and no debts at all. Some of these rather sketchy online pre-approval places said that with that same $70,000 income, when I was just coming up with these situations, that I could borrow, or whoever this person was, could borrow $442,000, so way more than that one that Investopedia says that you can, borrow. So what is the right amount of money to borrow, considering your income? My personal choice is actually this link that I'll actually put below. It's through Bankrate, and they have a nice little calculator sheet where it says all of your incomes, it lists some of your debts, just some, facetious situations on what, kind of taxes you would have to pay and insurances, etc. And so you just kind of fill that in, and then it gives you an amount that you would probably be able to be pre-approved for through a reputable company. So when I put that same in with the same exact criteria I was using from the sketchy online sites, it said that with a 30-year mortgage, that person could borrow $376,000, and with a 15-year mortgage, they could borrow $366,000. However, I have found that a lot of times when you get pre-qualified through anyone you get qualified through, again, that's another video once you shop through your mortgage, whether you choose a credit union or a bank or whatever, oftentimes they'll say, okay, what is your gross income? You give them your gross income, what are your, basic debts, your Social Security, so that they can check your credit, and then they'll give you an amount that you can spend. Well, honestly, it happens all the time that they will give you a number, like say this 376. So you go and shop for a house and you put a house under contract that's worth 375. But then they're like, okay, you're under contract, let's start processing your application. Give us your, last 2 years tax returns and all this other information, pay stubs and all this other stuff. And they're like, oh, well, your overtime isn't consistent, so we really can't count that overtime income. Well, your, last year's tax return was good, but the 1 year before that, it was less, and we have to take the average of those two, and, just other stuff. Oh, well, you're self-employed and you buy all these office supplies, so we're going to assume that you have to buy that every time. All of a sudden, that gross income that they let you have and that what they gave you that pre-approval number for isn't what they can actually use when processing your loan. So they'll say, okay, I'm sorry, but that set 375 that we originally quoted you, because of all the information that you've given us now, we believe the only purchase price that you would be able to have is 350. Well, you're already under contract for this house that's 375, so basically that contract falls through. Now you have to go look for other houses, etc., and you probably paid some of those closing costs toward trying to buy that house. Maybe you've already gotten an appraisal, maybe you've already gotten an inspection, and so you've paid all this money to try to make the deal go through, and then it stops. So that can actually cost a lot of money. That's why in the beginning of the series I mentioned that I highly recommend becoming pre-approved rather than pre-qualified. That means when you actually shop around for your mortgage, you choose who you want to go through, you submit all of your information then, whatever it is they require, you give them your, tax returns and all this other stuff. They look it over, they tell you exactly how much you can borrow. That way you don't have these kind of instances come up later. But I also want to point out that just because they tell you, okay, well, pre-qualified you would be 375, pre-approved you'd be 370 or 350 or something like that. Look at what the payment would actually look like. This is extremely important because sometimes people will be like, okay, $350,000 sounds like a lot, but they say that's what I can borrow, so cool. And then they sit down at the closing table and it's like, oh my gosh, that's a $1,300 monthly payment. I can't afford that. My rent right now is, $900, $1,000. That's quite a bit more than that. So when you get pre-approved or pre-qualified, make sure you look at what they tell you that payment would look like, and then consider that according to what you normally pay now, and also some of the other costs that you have come up. So there are, of course, other continuing costs when it comes to living in your house. There's not only that mortgage payment, but there's also going to be repairs. Yes, there's going to be repairs. There may not be repairs now, but as you're living in that house, there will be repairs later. So it's important to budget for those types of costs. And sometimes people buy, fixer-uppers that really do need repairs now. Sometimes, there are outdated houses, so you want to fix them up and just upgrade it. So while the sink works fine, that super bright pink countertop with that blue sink just doesn't work for you and your style. So you want to upgrade it. So that's another cost. Sometimes they charge you, turn-on fees to get your utilities switched on. Of course, there's always the monthly utilities. That's important to consider too, because again, if you're renting, say, a small apartment now, and then you're buying a much larger house, your utilities could easily double or even triple, depending on what you have included in your rent and how much bigger the house is, etc., or if it's in another district, because I know there are some districts around us where water is like double the price it is where I live now, that sort of thing. So monthly utilities is definitely something you want to consider, and definitely don't skimp on asking about this. As I've been shopping for a house and I've been wondering about what the utilities are in the different houses we've been looking for, I'll ask the seller's agent, hey, what are the utilities for this house? What does an average, monthly bill look like when you're heating it in the winter? That sort of thing. And I've never been told that the seller won't disclose this information. Every time I've asked it, the seller's agent has always been able to produce this information so that I can consider, all right, this purchase price is going to have this much of a payment, I'm going to have to pay this much utilities, so I can make sure I'm not going to end up buying a house that I can't afford. And I highly recommend that you do the same, of course. There's the yearly taxes you're going to have to pay on your house for the entire time you own it. It don't matter how long you own it, you're still going to have to pay taxes. And in some states, this is even a foreclosable thing. They can put a lien against your house, and even if you own your house in full, they can foreclose on your house to take the taxes out of that sale price. Not everywhere is this allowed, of course, so, it can change according to where you live and whatnot. But yes, taxes are definitely something you need to account for, but you're going to have to pay every single year. Sometimes it's included in your mortgage, sometimes it's not. So that's also important to find out, because if you have that $1,200 mortgage payment when you're used to $900 and $1,000 in taxes isn't even incorporated into that, and you have to pay all that on top of it, yeah, you can see how people can get themselves in over their heads. There are sometimes HOAs if you have newer neighborhoods, etc., so that's definitely something to consider. There are other dues. Yearly insurances, sometimes that's included in your mortgage, sometimes it's not. Again, you want to find that out for yourself. And of course, there's all this money, or there are some things that you might need for landscaping, especially if you're not used to having a home of your own or being a homeowner. You're going to want to consider the cost that it's going to take to either have somebody do that or do it yourself, and the tools that you're going to have to buy, etc. So I would highly recommend looking at the list, adding up all the stuff that you would have pertain to you, and then, balance it according to how much you're used to paying now, so that you can make sure that you're not going to get in over your head on the deal. So there you go. House affordability is a rather complicated type of thing. Hopefully I was able to break it down a little bit to where you can kind of better understand, how to calculate out how much you're going to need, so that you can make sure to afford it not only the whole time while you're living there, but also while you're closing on it, to make sure you're accounting for all of the costs, etc. for that too. That way you don't end up going broke trying to buy it, or you're not staying broke, the whole time you're trying to live there. So anyway, hopefully this video was helpful to you. I'm sure it's not exhaustive, but it's just a basic overview of what you can expect when buying and living in a house. I'm Frugal Green Girl. Thanks for watching.